Ruth 1, verse 7 through 18. And as I lead up to that, Naomi was from Judah. She lived with her husband and her sons in Moab. Her sons married local women, Orpah and Ruth. 5 years later, Naomi's husband and sons died. This is the story of Naomi and her daughter-in-laws returning to her homeland in Judah. Ruth 1, 7 through 18. And I'll be reading from the NIV Bible. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-laws, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show kindness to you as you have shown to your dead and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them, and she wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to give you any more sons who would become your husband? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband, even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and they gave birth to sons. Would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me." At this they wept again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people, and her gods go back with her. Please go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you from me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her.
I'm realizing that to speak about intimacy and connectedness in our bodies, I can't do it from so far away. And there's so many up here. I'm kind of drawn this direction because there's like a nice big group in the front. So last week, we praised God for making our bodies. God declared that they were very good, and we wrestled with the notion that we don't always see it that way, that sin distorts it, that we have a hard time recognizing the goodness inherent in us as being created by God. And yet, hopefully, we hold on to that hope and that trust that if God says that they're very good, then they are very good, and we hope to live in a way that shows that and believes that in other people that we interact with. Today, we want to spend some time, as you could tell from the opening, paying attention to this reality that is intimacy, that is connectedness. And really, when we talk about it, we need to start in some way with the reality of disconnectedness. And I don't really think that I need to belabor this point that we are disconnected. I think it's easy for us to look around and recognize that we are disconnected from one another because we see on the news what we as human beings do to each other. We know from our own relationships, from physical distance and emotional distance, that we are disconnected from one another in various ways. We are also disconnected with ourselves. We don't know ourselves as well as we want to. We don't understand why we do make some of the choices we make or do some of the things we do. And in this day and age, it feels extra ridiculous to be disconnected because we live in the information age. We live in the age of internet. We live in the age of smartphones. We live in a time in which we should be more connected than ever. And in some ways, we are more connected, but not in meaningful ways. And studies show that in the last 5 years, the levels of people naming that they are lonely on a regular basis or feel lonely is going up and up all the time. So I'd like to read a quote, an extended quote from author Rob Bell, who gives this a theological context. And I want to read his paragraph about how he sees this happening in Scripture. So this is the quote by Rob Bell. In the first chapter of Genesis, when God creates the first people, he blesses them. This is significant. God's blessing is the peace of God resting on people. The story begins with humans in right relationship, in healthy, life-giving connection with their Maker. All of their other relationships flow from the health of this one central relationship, people and God. They're connected with the earth. They're connected with each other. They're naked and they feel no shame. And then everything goes south. They choose another way and they become disconnected. God goes looking for them in the garden, asking, "Where are you?" The first humans make coverings of fig leaves and then they're banished from the garden, disconnected from each other, disconnected from the earth. The woman is told that there is going to be conflict between her and the man. The man is told that there is going to be conflict between him and the soil. And this is where you and I come in. We were born into a world, into a condition of disconnection. Things were created to be a certain way, and they're not that way. And we feel it in every fiber of our being. Is this why the first thing newborns do is cry? We're severed and cut off and disconnected in 1,000 ways, and we know it, we feel it, we're aware of it every day. It's an ache in our bones that won't go away. And so from an early age, we have this awareness of the state of disconnection we were born into, and we have a longing to reconnect. Let me read that last sentence one more time. Last two sentences. It's an ache in our bones that won't go away. And so from an early age, we have this awareness of the state of disconnection we were born into, and we have a longing to reconnect. Now, just this last week, I came across some people who were perfectly happy for that disconnection, because I was asking one of the young boys in this congregation who he sits with in his elementary school class. And he said, "Oh, I sit with one of my friends, another boy, and then the rest are, just a bunch of wretched girls." And 5 minutes ago, I was sitting in the pew with my daughters, and they had a pack of stickers that had boys and girls on the stickers, and one of them pulled all the girls off and beautifully displayed it on her bulletin and then said, "Here, Dad, you can have these. These are just the boys." And so we laugh at that, we recognize that as cute, and yet maybe there's the pain of the reality that we know that that's not right. It's funny now, but that's not right. We know that's not right, and so it's an ache in our bones. We have a longing to reconnect. Now, scientific research shows and supports this fact that we have a longing to reconnect. When mothers give birth, it is becoming more and more common in the medical profession to make sure that the baby and the mother and the father receive skin-to-skin contact. And that's because of the benefits that have been proven by immediate skin-to-skin contact. So it can and does. Immediate skin-to-skin contact improves the baby's ability to regulate temperature, body temperature, and stabilize its own heartbeat. It improves the baby's ability to breastfeed. Immediate skin-to-skin contact even shows benefits for the baby if it's not with the mother. So in situations of a C-section and the mother is not available, not in a position to have skin-to-skin contact with the baby, they'll put the baby immediately on the father's chest. And when that happened, babies who were on their father's chest stopped crying, calmed down faster and fell asleep more quickly than those babies who went directly to a crib after a C-section. Not only is this immediate skin-to-skin contact beneficial for the babies, but there's evidence showing that it helps reduce symptoms of postpartum depression in mothers and increase the sensations of bonding and attachment between mother and baby. We are hardwired in our DNA to be connected and in contact with other human beings. Now, interestingly, I've seen that there's other places where we can see this desire for connectedness that I think in some ways is universal. I don't think it's just those of us that are Christians. This is a universal thing. And where I've seen it recently is in sitcoms, because I like to watch TV. And I've noticed, if you listen to some of the theme songs, you notice that there's this overarching idea that when we watch a sitcom, we want to feel good and we want to feel like we're connected to other people. So the show Friends is about friends and siblings and couples, and the song goes, "I'll be there for you." I'm not going to sing it, because you're there for me too. You're all singing it in your head, I know. Right? Gilmore Girls is about a mother and a daughter and their family and friends. "Where you lead, I will follow," the song goes. "Anywhere that you tell me to. If you need me to be with you, I'll follow where you lead." Sound a little bit like Naomi and Ruth? Many people know Cheers. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. Anybody a fan of the Golden Girls? I loved the Golden Girls. Yes? Does anyone else? Becky asked, what are the Golden Girls? Comedy gold. Literally, Golden Girls. "Thank you for being a friend," the song goes. "Travel down the road and back again. Your heart is true. You're a pal and a confidant." And of course, I can't go without mentioning Full House. Everywhere you look, there's a heart, a hand to hold on to. Everywhere you look, there's a face of somebody who needs you. There is a universal desire. It's built into our bones. It shows up in our culture, that we desire to be connected in meaningful ways, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, spiritually. The list goes on and on. So we see this in this opening scene in Genesis 2, that after God declares everything good, and in fact declares everything very good, in Genesis 2, God surveys the scene again after creating Adam, the earth one, the earthling. The Hebrew word for earth is Adama, and the word for the first human is Adam. Adama, Adam. Earth one, earthling, the one out of the earth. And God looks around and says, man, everything else was good. This isn't good for this earth person to be alone. So a suitable companion is to be found, and we heard the story as Wanda read it. Now, for many, including those who recorded the story, there's a direct link here to the marriage relationship. And I think that's good and that's helpful, but I think we need to understand that that's not the only way to look at this passage, because the story of Adam and Eve is the story of humanity broadly. Then the fact that Adam is not alone is not particularly, I don't think, about one particular man and needing one particular woman, but about human beings. It is not good for them to be alone. They're representations of humanity in general, and the goodness comes when human beings have partners, have companions, have people to do the work of God, the work of caring for the earth alongside. I think it's important that we name this because if we assume that a concept like intimacy is limited to just what happens between a husband and a wife, then we miss out on all the various ways that we need to and should be connected with other people in various kinds of relationship. So I want us to be able to define intimacy much more broadly than simply husband and wife. Rod Cooper defines intimacy as the ability to experience an open, supportive, compassionate relationship without fear of condemnation or loss of one's identity. Intimacy is the ability to experience an open, supportive, compassionate relationship without fear of condemnation or loss of one's identity. That can apply to any type of relationship that we're talking about. Parent-child, sibling and sibling, mentor-mentee, BFFs. Best friends forever. BFFs. Spouses. I believe that we see this revealed throughout Scripture. David and Jonathan are portrayed as best friends. In 1 Samuel 18, this is what it says about David and Jonathan. The soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Jesus and Lazarus were clearly close. Jesus arrives after Lazarus has died and been put in his tomb, and Jesus weeps for him in John 11. Jesus calls disciples to be with him, to share life and ministry together. They travel together, they eat together. They're together in the midst of large crowds of people. They're together in times of quiet and solitude on a boat or on a hillside. Jesus says to them in John 15, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. Jesus washes their feet and tells them that they need to wash each other's feet. We see this amazing connection between Mary and Elizabeth in the book of Luke. They're related in some way, cousins or second cousins or something like that. And when Mary becomes pregnant, she runs to share the news with Elizabeth, and the two of them celebrate together what God is doing in their lives and wrestle with what it means for them. There's a deep connection between the two. It's a wonderfully intimate scene between two women sharing their very lives with one another. And in fact, Mary stays with Elizabeth for 3 months. So now think today of our passage of Naomi and Ruth. A tragic story, a powerful story. Naomi and her family moved from Judah, from Bethlehem to Moab. And her sons, their sons married Moabite women, local women, Orpah and Ruth. Then in a tragic scene, the men of that family die. And when they die, Naomi decides it's better for her to return to her family of origin, to go back to Bethlehem. And initially, the daughters-in-law come with her because that is their new family unit. But as they turn to leave, Naomi realizes, no, that's not right. You women need to be with your own families. You need to be able to start again. I can't help you start over again. I can't give you another husband. So she tells them to go back where their future is more bright and their prospects are more hopeful. They cry, they hug, they protest. She insists. Orpah eventually returns with to her family's home. Ruth continues the protest. And instead of going home, she commits to being with Naomi, being her companion in what is bound to be a difficult journey. Then she makes this powerful statement of promise and intimacy. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. This is the definition of connectedness. So it's universal, this disconnectedness that we want to solve, and so we reach out in meaningful ways with people all around us. What I want to do is offer some suggestions for how we move forward, knowing that reality, understanding that reality, that there is something in us drawing us towards other people. Here's the first thing we need to do, and that is to take time to thank God for the people in our lives with whom we do have healthy connections, healthy intimacy. It's easy for us to think about the people in our lives that we feel disconnected from and feel the pain of that because of heartbreak and loss and distance and death. But we always are connected to other people in meaningful ways, and we need to take time to thank God for those people, those parents and grandparents and friends and neighbors, people that we ought to be thankful for. We need to thank God for the ways in which there have been and continue to be people who know us, people who respect us, love us, with whom we have a mutually supportive relationship. And once you've thanked God for those people, thank those people. Send a note, make a phone call, give a hug. It's never too late to let the people in your life know that you care and that you're grateful for their presence. The second thing I would suggest is that we need to be aware of the ways in which our desires to be connected can be distorted by sin. We need to stand firm against those temptations. This obviously shows itself in things like pornography, infidelity, all sorts of other sexual sin, but I also think that part of this shows itself in other ways, like materialism, like addictions. We feel this disconnectedness. It feels like an emptiness inside of us, and so we try to fill it up with things we can buy. We try to fill it up with drugs or with social media or any other way that makes us feel something, but isn't true connection with other people and with God. We need to realize that that's what's going on, that we are trying to fill an emptiness. We are trying to fill a disconnectedness with something else beyond what God had hoped for and planned for. To realize what we're doing, to realize that we're trying to fill our things with things that will never truly fill us, is the first step to ending that habit. It's also important, I think, at this point to name distortions that we may not even realize because of other things like difference in power and culture. For example, Disney will tell us over and over and over and over again that they lived happily ever after. And I think we have to recognize that because this disconnectedness that we are experiencing is so much more than just a human thing, we are disconnected with our Maker, with the one with whom we want to get back to, the one who created us. Because of that, I think we need to recognize that no one relationship will ever fulfill us. And it's unfortunate when we project the idea that when we find our soulmate or find our life partner, find our spouse, that person will completely fulfill us for the rest of our lives and us them. And as hard as it is to hear, that's not reality. Because our longing is so much deeper than something just purely human. And because our desire to be connected goes beyond one person, it goes into multiple ways of being connected with other people. So we need to recognize that. We need to name that. Not that we hold ourselves to a lower standard in our marriage relationship or with our best friend, but that we understand that we're not going to completely fulfill the other person and they will not completely fulfill us. that only God can make that fulfillment happen. And then we can be free to live and to love and not worry, because we know that disappointment will come. That's the reality right now. Until Jesus comes again, we will always be experiencing some measure of disappointment because we're not living in that fullness of God's time and God's creation. So recognize that. Name that. Share that reality with your spouse and be okay with that. Grieve together that you won't be able to completely fulfill each other. And in that vulnerability, deepen your love and care for each other. There's also distortions in power that we need to pay attention to. We need to pay attention to appropriate relationships, appropriate touching. And the place where I see myself doing this all the time is with adorable babies. Because I want to tickle and touch. I want to offer affirming touch to babies, to children. And yet I have to recognize that there is a power play going on in which I can choose that, and many times the babies cannot. Or if they do protest, oh, that's cute, they don't want to be tickled, I'll tickle you anyway. Am I truly conveying a mutual, respectful relationship with that other human being by saying, it's okay if you don't want to be tickled, I'll tickle you anyway? I have to recognize that I want to be connected and make sure that I am finding appropriate ways for physical touch to happen. To ask if someone wants to be hugged. I want to give someone a hug. And I have given my share of unequal hugs. Because when I go in for a hug, there's very few people who are going to defend themselves. Just because, I don't know, because they freeze, right? So we need to recognize that in our own lives, the ways in which we want to touch, we want to be connected, but pay attention to how that relationship is actually formulated and what's happening there. We know, and it's usually the person who doesn't have the choice or who is on the lower end of the power play that recognizes what's going on, and not those of us who are in power. There was a time at summer camp we would stand in a circle at the end of the night, and we would hold hands, the whole camp together, all 60 of us or whatever. We'd stand in a circle and we'd sing our prayer. And what I would usually do is I'd step up into the middle and I'd give the announcements for the next day, and then I'd step back in and join the circle. Well, there was one particular evening in which Becky was standing right beside me, so I stepped up, I gave the announcements, I stepped back, and instead of just locking hands, I did the whole interlocking fingers thing because it was Becky and I wanted to be a little bit more connected because that's my wife, right? That's an appropriate interconnectedness. And while we're singing, I feel her kind of tugging away from me, and I'm going like, what is going on? But I'm singing, I'm praying, I'm trying to stay focused. And as soon as the prayer's done, I look down and there's a 13-year-old camper girl standing right beside me, interlocked fingers with me, and immediately I throw my hands up and say, sorry, as she, runs back to her cabin, and Becky is beside her, crying with laughter at how hilarious this was, that I was unaware of what was going on. So there are times that certain kinds of touch are very appropriate and necessary, and we need them. And there's times when we need to be aware of the ways in which the power play is making it an unequal relationship. Now, finally, I think it's important that we realize, like I just said, that the true center of our longing is to be connected to our Creator. I truly believe this, that all of our longing to be connected to other people comes from a deeper spiritual reality that we feel disconnected from God, the one in whose image we are made, the one that feels too far away sometimes. That is the focus and the source of our disconnectedness that we want to be reconnected with. And when we find ways to reconnect with that source, that creator, all of our relationships will improve. When we are reconnected in meaningful ways with our source, with our creator, we will necessarily be making better connections with the human beings in our lives. Again, we will never be fully satisfied as human beings with just our human relationships. Because we have been formed in love, because we are known, because every hair in our head is known, we seek to belong with our Creator. Creator and creation belong together. That's the beginning of the Bible, and that's the end of the Bible. Creator and creation together. Listen to Colossians 1. Colossians 1, 16 through 20. For in him, in Jesus, all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, in Jesus, and through him, through Jesus, to reconcile to himself all things. This is ultimately our desire, that all things in heaven and on earth, creator and creation, would be reunited, would be reconciled. Until that time when we are all together, we have each other. We have various ways of connecting in meaningful relationships to the people around us. And just as importantly, we have assurance that God's Spirit will be with us. The same Spirit that showed up in Jerusalem to connect people from around the world that wouldn't have been able to communicate, but were given the gift of language that they could share with one another. The Spirit drew people together, connected them in ways they never thought possible. That same Spirit encourages us, challenges us, helps us to know the presence of God and to bring us closer together. So let's give thanks to God for our connections to each other and to our Creator. Amen.